Hi, my name is Sam Greenberg, and for my topic, I've chosen to do applying a tradition of sharing to the Arctic climate change crisis. So, first of all, climate change is happening in the Arctic, and it's happening worse than anywhere else in the world. Callaway states that for Alaska and Western Canada, the average mean winter surface air temperature has increased by as much as 5 to 7 degrees Fahrenheit, 3 to 4 degrees Celsius, over the last 60 years, which is, as the literature predicted, about triple the change experienced at the equator. So what this means is that while everybody in the world is going on about how climate change is affecting, the world, most of them are only looking at it from a point of view from the equator, whereas in the Arctic it's 3 times worse than that. So it hits the Arctic worse than any other area in the world, literally. So that has a lot of effects. So White states that permafrost temperatures at the 20-meter depth have been rising on the north slope of Alaska since the 1980s, and a rise of 2 to 4 degrees Celsius in borehole permafrost temperatures have been observed in the last 50 to 100 years. So permafrost is all over Alaska, for those of you who aren't familiar with it. What permafrost is basically moisture that's frozen in the ground. And for those of you who live in Fairbanks, anybody who's gone down Sheena Hot Springs Road and has noticed all those bumps, that's due to melting permafrost. So, or it's technically called thawing permafrost. So when the permafrost thaws, the ice melts, and as everybody knows, ice expands when it's frozen from water. So then when it melts, it contracts, and it can bring the ground level down and cause things like roads to crack and even houses to cave in on themselves if the foundation is lost from the thawing permafrost. So the permafrost thawing can cause massive infrastructure problems. And up north on the Arctic slope, there's a lot of permafrost present in the ground due to how cold it is. The other thing that the rising temperatures cause is that, as Smith points out, today's satellite imagery shows us an Alaska-sized hole in the summer sea ice cover, where 30 years ago it was a solid sheet, and the prediction is that by 2050, most of the Arctic Ocean will be ice-free in the summer. So the sea ice is crucial, A, for wildlife, which I'll get to later, such as polar bears who use the ice to hunt on. But the other thing that the sea ice does is that it protects a lot of the Arctic villages from violent storms that come in the fall. So in the fall, what normally happens is the ice is frozen by then, the violent storms come in, and sure, they cause problems, but nothing too major. But with the ice disappearing, what can happen is, well, normally the ice acts as kind of a buffer for the storms. The storm can pick up water along the way and cause a lot of coastal damage to the villages. And about 90% of the villages on Alaska are set up on the edge of or very near major water sources. So with no ice covering protecting these villages, the ice comes, or the, pardon me, the storms come in, have no buffer, and then can devastate villages. Um, so here's a picture of infrastructure lost due to permafrost. This is a combination of permafrost actually, and the coast of the village is kind of eroding away due to those violent storms I mentioned. Uh, Infrastructure damage is devastating to any community, but it's especially hurtful to the Arctic communities because of the cost of transporting supplies and to repair those are very high due to how remote the villages are. So infrastructure damage can really mean devastation to Arctic communities. So the rising temperatures also cause the changing environment. So as the permafrost degrades, thermokarst process can result in the draining of ponds, according to White. What thermokarst is basically, it's basically a lot of the ponds and lakes in Alaska have a permafrost covering on the base of them. So the bottom of it to prevent the water from draining into the soil, what a lot of the ponds have is a permafrost covering which acts as a hard surface to keep the water from draining. And as the permafrost melts, a lot of the ponds and lakes lose their bottoms and then they empty out into the soil underneath them, which has also devastating effects on the wildlife, which I'll get to in a minute. But then also, according to Callaway, boreal forests are expanding north at the rate of 62 miles for every increase of 1.8 degrees Fahrenheit in air temperature. Predictions are that in the next 100 years, the Seward Peninsula will have a transition from a primarily tundra ecosystem to one of white spruce and deciduous forest. So climate change, while everybody focuses on the effects that it has on the water, there's a lot of effects on the actual forest itself. So the North Slope area is mostly tundra, and the Alaska natives up there have adapted to that. The wildlife has adapted to that, And so with the changing environment, that changes the entire way of life up there. And for every 1.8 degrees Fahrenheit change, the boreal forest expands north 62 miles. And if we remember from a previous slide, since in the last like 50 years, there's been a 5 to 7 degree increase in temperature in the Arctic. So for every, again, we'll round to about 2 degrees, there's a 60-mile increase of the boreal forest. That would be, due to the 5 to 7 degree, that'd be about 150-mile increase in the boreal forest expansion since then. And so on the left, you can see a traditional tundra ecosystem found in the Arctic. And on the right, the boreal forest ecosystem currently found in central Alaska, the interior, runs into southeast Alaska also, but there you can start to get a boreal or rainforest also. The boreal forest is actually the largest ecosystem on the planet, and at this rate, it's going to be increasing. So again, the tundra ecosystem on the left will be disappearing as it's overtaken by the boreal forest ecosystem on the right. So the biggest effect that the changing environment has is the effect on the food. So, according to Callaway again, certain important subsistence species like caribou will likely disappear during the tundra to boreal forest transition. So the caribou are adapted to the tundra because they eat the lichen found in the tundra itself, and the tundra is mostly composed of lichen. Um, so things like caribou will disappear, which will then have an effect on like any bears that would hunt the caribou or anything that hunts the caribou themselves, like well, it's mostly just bears. Um, and if we remember from earlier, the ponds draining, a lot of waterfowl that migrate to Alaska depend on these ponds for food, and so with no ponds, there's going to be less waterfowl migrating north, and again, the waterfowl are also a source of food for the Alaska natives up there. And so right away, with the climate change, you lose both waterfowl and caribou, and then whatever eats them. So things like bears and rabbits, that the rabbits rely on the ponds for food for the vegetation and other small animals around there. So with the transition from tundra to boreal forest, a lot of the food supplies of the Alaskan natives are lost. And then, according to Kuhn and Kahn, it is a general consensus that traditional food of indigenous people is the best food that's available to them. So currently, the Arctic is a mixed economy of both, or mixed food supply source of both the market food that can be flown in there, that's more of like the Western diet, and then also the subsistence diet that is traditional for the Alaskan natives there. And again, it's a general consensus that the traditional food is more healthy for them than the market food, based on two things. One, that the market food flown in there is generally going to be high in fats and salts, and then therefore can lead to health issues like diabetes and obesity. And then also that the traditional foods they've been eating for thousands of years, they're high in oils, certain minerals, and it's a generally healthy diet. A lot of the food's fresh, no preservatives, no antibiotics, um, and so for them it's the best food available because they can't get anything healthier from the market. Any meats are going to be very high in preservatives, usually high in fat, cheaper quality. Uh, so with the disappearance of subsistence food, the Alaskan natives are losing their best food source also. So you can see caribou is a food staple of the Arctic, eating the tundra right there. So things like the caribou, waterfowl, and anything based off of those will be disappearing over the next during the transition of the tundra to boreal forest, which is likely to happen in the next 100 years again, according to Callaway. So basically, all these add up to being the Arctic being doomed. So again, just to recap, we have coastal erosion, permafrost, thawing that causes both of those cause infrastructure damage to the villages themselves. Any repairs to the villages are very expensive due to how remote they are. We have a changing environment due to climate change, so the higher temperatures cause the ponds to drain, the very environment itself, the tundra will be changing into boreal forest. So food supplies will be lost. Their food sources they're traditionally are the healthiest option for them because market food isn't healthy and can lead to health issues. So of course, one option could be to try to save a village. That doesn't really solve the problem of the food disappearing, but perhaps um, the villagers could adapt to different foods there. But again, infrastructure damage still looms over them. So for the villages of Shishmaref and Nutak, relocation costs were found to be approximately $100 million each. Um, And sure, you might be able to move them for that cost, but the state has serious financial issues due to the oil market right now. The oil market is seriously affecting the state. We're running low on all budget for all sorts of things from schools. It was talks of implementing a tax. Basically, the state doesn't have the money to do this right now, and the villages are already poor in terms of U.S. dollars because they don't really generate a lot of income. Because traditionally, there's no need to. Uh, just basically catch your own food. We don't, trade food, trade crafts. Um, Villages are very poor monetarily. However, traditionally, there is a tradition of sharing. Um, So according to our Getzner and West, the second priority is to share the catch. So basically, whenever a hunter would go out and get his food, he would first of all honor the catch. Do it cleanly, clean up very cleanly. Build up so that the spirits of the animals would be appeased and that they would be willing to give themselves up in the future. And the second priority is to share the catch among the elders of the community, those who were sick and couldn't get out to get their food themselves, the young, and also anybody who didn't have the supplies to go out and get food themselves. Basically, anybody who couldn't get anything, the second priority is to share the catch. It was very much sharing the resources, which was vital to the community surviving in a very harsh environment. Lee gives the example of her friend under a pseudonym, Flora Marks, who goes out and she goes back to her village. So Marks moved to Anchorage from a rural village, and she goes back every now and then to visit friends and also pick up her the food she grew up on. And she brings out donuts to trade for them. So basically, she trades donuts for things like caribou, seal, supplies to make crafts with. And while she brings the donuts out, donuts are very easy to get in Alaska. They don't require a lot of effort. But the more traditional foods like the seal and the caribou require a lot of effort to get. So while at first it may seem like a trade, really her friends are just sharing the food with her because even no matter how much they like donuts, donuts are easy enough to get. So her friends share the food with Marks, and then Marks in turns brings it back into Anchorage, and the food will be brought out for sharing with friends and families at future meals. So she shares the food further with other Alaska natives in Anchorage who don't have access to the more traditional foods. And what's also significant about that is not only does she share it, but she shares it with people who she doesn't really know that well. I mean, of course, she's become friends with them, but she doesn't have any tribal affiliation with them, any blood connection, any village connection. So she shares with Alaska natives from all over Alaska. And here, fish around a rack, it's a traditional food source for them. Um, and things like this, if somebody couldn't catch enough for themselves over the winter, things like this would be shared with them so that they could survive. So the tradition of sharing is very heavy there. So combining the climate change and combining the tradition of sharing, the best option for the Arctic slope villagers is to relocate them south to more stable locations where they're safer from things like infrastructure damage due to the coastal erosion and permafrost damage, and also to areas where there are other villagers there who could teach them how to hunt in a different environment, because most of the knowledge of the elders and the respected hunters would be lost and useless in a new environment. So for no matter how much you're adapted to hunting in the Arctic environment, if the Arctic environment changes from tundra to boreal forest, all that knowledge isn't good anymore. So they have to move to a more stable location where they're the people in the village could teach them both how to hunt in that area, teach them their way of life. Well, not teach them their way of life. I take that back. Teach them how to survive in that climate. Because moving to another Alaska Native village would be easier for them to keep the people relocated. It'd be easier for them to keep their culture in another Alaska Native village where they can live a subsistence lifestyle if they choose to do so, than if they move to a city where they're completely thrown into an urban environment, and it's very different from living in a rural village. Um, in relocating to the new village, it wouldn't be like the villagers in the new village in the host village would be supporting them by any means, but more be like the relocated villagers are permitted to land there to build houses on or um, build homes, permission to hunt in their lands, fish in their lands. So it wouldn't be that they're sharing resources and they're babying them necessarily. It'd be more like they're permitted to live there, so they'd be sharing the land and the resources themselves. So, in conclusion, that in the foreseeable future, the Arctic will become uninhabitable to the villagers living there, and that saving the villages is not possible due to how financially expensive it is. So, the best option is to apply a tradition of sharing there and relocate the villagers south to more stable areas where they can live out their lives. Now, I definitely don't think this is a great solution. I don't think there is a good solution to this problem. It's an awful problem. The best solution, obviously, is to get climate change under control right now through political action. But if it's not on the current path, the best option is to relocate the villagers to more stable environments. Because again, the Arctic will become uninhabitable. Here's a reference to the cited page, if anybody's wondering. All right, that's all I have to say.